one of the other great things about digital sales rooms is it takes friction out of the sales process because there's increased coordination, there's increased visibility into the sales process and the stakeholders within that process. And it just reduces repetitive manual work. So again, what you're trying to do for your buyers and prospects, you want to also do internally, reduce friction in the onboarding process and make it a seamless branded experience. And then I think finally, what I'm super excited about, and I don't know how, we're not there yet, but I think we're getting there, are the insights that we get from digital sales rooms. If we can get everyone interacting in one space, we can figure out if it's a 45-day or 180-day sales process, what are the real stages of the sales process? What was asking for? What did they really need to make a decision? And take those insights and funnel them back into training programs or enablement programs or marketing efforts, and use those insights to make us smarter and have more success, increase deal velocity, increase win rates, all kinds of things we can focus on. I think the insights are like TBD. I think we're still trying to figure that out, but I think that's kind of the promise of a digital sales room.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, I'll tell you, I might have some trouble with laughing fits because of the guest that we have on the show today, because I think her wit, I think she's absolutely brilliant. She's intelligent. I've known her for a long time, and every interaction that I have with her, to me, it's always enlightening, and I find so much joy when I'm done. So I have Anne Slough on the show today. Anne, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. That's a lot of pressure. My gosh, I'm not sure I can live up to it.
I know you can. So today we're going to be talking about something that came across, my airwaves, I guess you'd say, a while back, when I was sitting in one of our peerroundtables.com sessions with our community of revenue and sales leaders, and I started asking them something that I saw you had written about and provided some insight in, and I asked them about digital sales room. And we have a couple thousand sales leaders that are actually part of our community. And while they weren't all on this one particular call, when I mentioned digital sales rooms, they were like, well, what's that? And I'm like, oh, I need to get Anne on the show so we can actually, hopefully, have people to be more aware of what digital sales rooms are and how they can actually impact the B2B buyer experience. We often have talked about the silos that exist between B2B marketing and B2B sales, and digital sales rooms can be one of those, enablers to help them to come and work closer together to hopefully, make that buyer's decision-making cycle a lot shorter and also increase sales. But before we get into that, if you could share a little bit about your background and experience before we jump in.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. So I've been in sales for over 30 years. I'm getting old, over 30 years. And I started out like most people do as an individual contributor, and then grew my career and was a sales leader. I led sales teams. I led some parts of marketing. I've led customer success. So really that entire revenue engine, I've worked across that revenue engine. Then I went into consulting, and I was at a consulting firm for 10 years, and we did performance improvement and consulting with the C-suite around how do you create a high-performing sales culture. And then I was an analyst for the last 3 years in a revenue operations practice. So almost any part of the revenue engine I have managed or worked in or led in some way. So yeah, that's what I've been doing, and now I'm working with an organization about with their sales leadership population, how to define what does good look like, what are the processes and tools we're going to use to measure that, and how do we close that gap?
So, I mean, for me, it's you're taking all of what you've learned across the past a few decades, and
Yeah.
applying it within an organization so that they can be essentially one of those top tier performers in regards to their sales operations, and I would also say marketing operations, right?
Yeah, and mainly it's with the actual sales leadership population, but obviously nothing happens in a vacuum. And so we have to look at what are the tools and processes and metrics that determine what does good look like, and reverse engineer from there to actually enabling the population. So it's an exciting opportunity, and really it just kind of takes all the skills and tools in my toolbox and allows me to use them across the organization. So it's an exciting time for me. Yeah.
So okay, so then let's get down into the specifics of this digital sales room,
Yeah.
because I mean, I would dare to say, because of where you are and what you're doing and what you're tagged to do at the moment, that a digital sales room, could be something that could be very beneficial to the organization as well as the leaders within the organization in regards to making sure that all of the salespeople, are operating, at an, I guess you'd say, optimal or optimized level.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of digital sales rooms. They are early. There, I don't think there's wide adoption of them. But digital sales rooms, and we can talk about kind of what they are. But the best analogy I have to kind of think about a digital sales room is if you think about Apple products, right? When the iPod first came out in 2001, I believe, it revolutionized the way that we look at music. We didn't have to carry around these cassettes and CD players and so at first when iPod came out, people didn't know how to use it. But then once you started using it, they thought, wow, this is revolutionary. And then the iPad came out and the same thing. I thought, why do I need an iPad when I have a desktop? But once I began to use an iPad, I realized, wow, this is lightweight, it's easier to carry. And then same thing with an Apple Watch. I think it was 2015, the Apple Watch first came out. And I thought, why would I need an Apple Watch? And I bought my son one, and now we can't live without it. So Apple products are best understood, I think, when you use them. And the other thing Apple does really well is it creates an ecosystem. So that if you stay within the ecosystem, that's when you really realize the maximum value of the product. And what you find with Apple users is that they evangelize Apple products to other people and bring them into the ecosystem. Well, digital sales rooms are a lot like that. I think there's a disconnect around or a lack of understanding around why would I use a digital sales room? Why wouldn't I just continue emailing attachments and proposals and content? Why do I need this centralized location or microsite, which is really what a digital sales room is, that creates this branded experience that is a permanent customer portal. It's really this one source of truth and creates visibility and transparency across the buyer journey and the seller journey. And also, importantly, gives us as a sales organization real-time buyer engagement insights about what content is having the biggest impact, what activities are happening at what stage of the sales process within these digital sales rooms, and they enable collaboration between internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. So I think if you think about, that's why I like the Apple analogy, because a lot of times I think Apple comes out with products, you think, why would I use this? But once you use it, you realize the value. Digital sales rooms are a lot like that. I think once people start using them and get in there and really explore all their capabilities, then the value will become really obvious.
Okay, so I think it's really important to talk about this whole journey that exists. So for me, I spend a lot of time and effort in what I refer to as the prospect experience and the prospect journey.
Yeah.
To me, what you're talking about as far as a digital sales room is concerned, it starts getting more into that buyer journey component where we've moved from prospect. Now we're going to get into some type of discovery. We're going to see if there's fit, all of those things that are associated with being able to deliver a product or solution. Is that correct?
Well, digital sales rooms have many use cases, and they span across the buyer journey from prospecting, even before to intent, right? So if you can create a digital sales room that you populate with content for the prospecting stage, and then you say, hey, Jim, I see you've been on our website, you've been searching around for information on X, Y, and Z. I've created this digital sales room for you. click on the link or the QR code and go into this room. And I think you'll find it populated with a lot of the content that I see you've been looking around on our website for. I put it all in one place for you. So that's really in the prospecting stage. Then Jim may come back and say, hey, Anne, this looks great. I want to learn more about X and Y. So I'd say, great, I've populated the sales room, the digital sales room with content on those particular solutions. Take a look around. Love to set up a first call with you and talk more about that. So it takes you all the way through the sales process. And then once the sale is closed, then you pass that off to the customer success group. And then the customer success person can say, wow, this is all the content Jim's seen. They co-created value through the sales process. These are the expectations the seller laid out and that the buyer has. Now they've purchased the solution. Now know exactly what Jim expects in this relationship. So it really can start from prospecting all the way through to discovery, to closing the sale, to then post-sale and implementation.
Okay, when you're talking, so there's, and I guess I should have defined a little bit different elements associated with prospecting. So if I have a demand scenario where they're coming to me and they already are kind of aware of their problem, they're aware of, the potential solution providers out there, that's one, particular element in regards to the whole prospecting piece. But when I have 6,500 competitors that are doing some similar things, that's a whole different story, because I have to go out and make myself known, or I have to do something from a prospect experience and a prospect journey. And I can see how that can fit as well. But I think what you're talking about here is really impacting some of the metrics that I see marketing and sales leaders really struggling with. And one is, for example, a study that came out that said most deals are actually lost to indecision. Well, why are they lost to indecision? And then it starts looking into those particular reasons. And one of the reasons is, first of all, the decision-making process in B2B, especially when you start talking about a higher ticket, has a very, very high bar that it needs to get over. That bar is one of, high levels of trust. I have to make sure this is going to work. I have to make sure that this is going to impact my business. I have to make sure it doesn't damage my reputation. I have to all these types of things that are fear-based. And also, you had mentioned something about the different people associated with the buyer decision-making process. There's all kinds of statistics that say the decision-making team has doubled. The time to close has doubled, or time to a decision, whether it's no decision or, not you or somebody or you.
Mm-hmm.
So you've seen a whole lot of use cases as you were talking about. What are some of the things for you that were just like aha moments when you saw these things put into place?
Yeah, so there are three different main use cases, I think, kind of more high level. So let me just zoom out for a minute. And one of them is around the long, complex buying cycle. So you were kind of getting there around, it's the 12 to 18 month sales cycle. It's a complex solution. And digital sales rooms, this is the use case that I most thought digital sales rooms would fit in or satisfy, because you're going to have multiple stakeholders as a part of the buying decision process, which most of the buying decision in B2B is consensus now. So there's anywhere from 6 to 9 decision makers or influencers or ratifier. Someone has a role within the buying process for each deal, right? So that you need a place for everyone to go. Instead of you mailing out the proposal or content or having an email to multiple people, you just populate these rooms, and then each person can go in and you can have that transparency within this room and keep a connected conversation. So it's this golden thread moving throughout those 12 to 18 month sales cycle. So that was kind of the most obvious one, because it reduces chaos, frankly, within that buying cycle. The next one, and I did a bunch of interviews actually with users of digital sales rooms and thinking about, because I had a question mark too. I thought, why would I use these rooms? I don't understand why I would go into these rooms. That was my big question. So I interviewed users. And the use case that was not as obvious to me was actually for these, you want to create a personalized experience for these long tails, basically these transactional sales cycle, the 3-month sales cycle. And why digital sales rooms were so powerful is because in these transactional sales cycles, it's not the same need always, but it's very similar. And you just kind of rinse and repeat. You're going to send the same content. So you create the room and you templatize it so that you can maybe personalize it a little bit with a, hey, Jim, or hey, Anne, or hey, Mary message. but the content's pretty much the same. And you're just repeating over and over and replicating the process in this digital sales room. And that was really beneficial. This was a big aha use case to me, actually, when users said, I talked to a gentleman who owns a brokerage firm, and he said, this has been amazing because now we can create a personalized experience for a transactional sale by using a digital sales room. So that was really interesting. And then the third use case that I thought was interesting as well is some of the people we talked to are using them internally first for onboarding and training new sales reps. So a sales leader might say, hey, Jim, welcome aboard. I've created a digital room for you. It's got all the first 30 days of content and training modules and everything you're going to need in this room. Leave comments. Let me know how things are going, and onboarding sales reps. And what that does is it creates that advocacy or the evangelist type personality I was talking about with Apple products. So you've used this room now internally. You've seen the value. You're like, wow, this is amazing. You're more likely then to create rooms for external prospects and customers because now you know how to use it. You've experienced it. So you're going to go evangelize through this digital room that you've created for your own customers and prospects because you've experienced it firsthand. And I thought that was a really interesting use case. And using it in an onboarding training mode versus just a sales mode.
You bring up a really interesting point, because I would dare to say that's one of the roadblocks that a lot of complex solutions and services actually have, is the buyer, the prospect, really doesn't have a good understanding of, how all of this might work, and getting them to be immersed in it can be helpful. So, okay, if I'm not selling digital sales rooms, how do I even immerse them into, the product or service? How do I, help them to see, the potential impact? How can I help them, to see what, the real problem is, the symptoms? I mean, there's all kinds of ways I can think about the education, taking.
Well, what do we find with the tech stack in general? And I know you've experienced this. We often have a pretty good tech stack in sales organizations, right? It's often pretty good. What we don't have is good adoption. So because then we don't have good adoption, we go out and buy another tool. And then that's not adopted. So we think, well, this tool must not be the right tool. Instead, it's really, we have to get users understanding the value so they actually adopt it, so that they then will use it with customers. And that's why I love that use case of using digital rooms internally to onboard your own salespeople so they experience it and they understand the intrinsic value of a digital sales room, which is part of the challenge is, we talk about how do we get customers to use it, but more importantly, or as importantly, we got to get sellers to use it first, right? So I think, there are several problems that digital sales rooms solve, but we can't solve any of those problems without adoption, without using it. So it's just a really good, clever way, I think, to get adoption in the tech stack.
I think that's a great point. So, okay, then talk about tech stack. When we start looking at tech stack, and you mentioned something about revenue. Well, now more and more organizations are looking, at that and trying to make sure that things are seamless and working well within an organization across sales and marketing and customer success or customer service. So if I start thinking about a digital sales room, how does that tech stack look like now when I have that in place? I have a CRM system, I have a marketing automation system, I have a, internal support system. How does all that fit?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that I would recommend is you have to know your buyer journey. And that sounds simple, but most organizations do not understand how buyers are A, actually buying from you, and B, want to buy from you, what the experience they want from you, right? So know that first. And then you figure out, okay, based on that, what should our sales process look like? And let's map it to that. Once you do that, then I think you look at your tech stack and say, how does our tech stack enable that buyer journey and the sales journey we've mapped to it? And then you back into it. And this very rarely happens. This is kind of the ideal state. So I would recommend go do that first. Figure out your buyer journey, figure out the buyer experience you want to create, align your sales process, and then look at your tech stack and begin rationalizing your tech stack. So I'm going to just put marketing to the side for a little bit, but I will make this in general comment. The tech stack is blurring. So a lot of functionality in the marketing tech stack is blurring or bleeding over into the sales tech stack and vice versa. In fact, you're starting to see, or you are seeing, marketing technologies create user interfaces for sellers. Same data, they're just repackaging it for a seller because they want to create this seamless journey from marketing to sales to customer success. So just know that and do your due diligence. You're going to have the core tech stack, right? You're going to have your CRM, your Salesforce automation. You're going to have sales content management in some way, sales engagement, your CPQ tools. Those are kind of your core stack. But then you got to think about, okay, based on that buyer journey, what technologies will enable that? I would argue digital sales room are a part of that, but they're often embedded within your sales content management systems, your sales readiness platforms. There are your sales engagement tools often have digital sales rooms embedded within them. So think about that because you probably have this capability in your tech stack already and just don't know it. You're just not aware that a vendor you're using provides this. There are standalone digital sales room providers, and I'm not here to recommend which way you should go because I don't know your business and I don't know your buyer journey. You need to figure that out, right? And go do that work. But what I would encourage you is go talk to your current vendors. You may be surprised that you have this capability. You're just not using it. You just didn't know it.
Well, and I think, and we should get into this into a second to kind of talk about, what it actually looks like within here. I mean, we've kind of hit it at a high level. We talked about, places where they can convene all of that, but maybe we'll walk through another particular example. But before we do that, I want to dig into a little bit deeper what you said in regards to the buyer journey.
Yeah.
You also had mentioned something about reverse engineering. So if I start thinking about the buyer journey, I'm not quite sure about the buyer journey. I mean, as we all know, each organization has its own personality as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
How they actually go about through their decision-making process differs. So if I'm sitting here and saying, gosh, I'm going to do a whole lot of engineering in regards to my, how my buyers are buying from me. I start putting on my statistical hat and I start saying, gosh, I can't just analyze one or two. I just can't just, actually analyze the ones that were streamlined and closed quick. I can't analyze the ones that took exhaustingly forever. I mean, give me an idea of how I actually would approach, getting a good understanding of what a common buyer journey would be that I could.
Yeah. Well, in most organizations of any kind of size, right, they have portfolio marketing, and that is portfolio marketing's job. Their entire job is to understand the buyer journey. That's all they do, right? They research the buyer journey, what kind of buyers, the ideal customer profile, what's our sweet spot. That is portfolio marketing's entire job. That's why they exist. So what I always say to the sales organization is go make friends with portfolio marketing. Go talk to your marketing, brethren and find out what they're doing, because that is portfolio marketing's sole purpose, is to understand the buyer journey. Who is buying from you? How do they want to buy from you? What kind of content do they need to make a decision at what stage in the process? That is portfolio marketing's job. Go find out, go talk to them and find that out, because that is the information that arms you with knowing, okay, now we understand that. How do we align our sales process to it?
Okay, so what if I'm sitting here and I'm in a situation where I'm kind of like that, getting into that growth mode in my organization, or I've just hit it, and you say portfolio marketing, you're like, well, what the heck is that? I don't have portfolio marketing.
If you don't have portfolio marketing, frankly, you need to just talk to your customers. I mean, honestly, go and talk to your customers. Deals, do win-loss analysis. The deals that you won, go ask them, why did we win this business? At each stage of the sales process, what did I do that was valuable to you? Did I send you a piece of content that you cared about? What kind of questions was I asking that were important to you? And same thing, the losses are harder because once they walk away from us, they don't always want to give us the time to have the conversation. But honestly, just go talk to, if you're a small organization, the beauty in that is you're a small organization. Go and talk to your customers. Find out why they're buying from you, what's meaningful to them. Even if they bought from you, they can give you insight to, hey, you know what, Anne, if you had done this, it probably would have closed the deal faster instead of the other thing you did. So I say just go talk to your customers.
So in today's world, when we start talking about pressures of sales, timelines and all that has to be met, when I start talking about, sales projections and being able to, hit certain numbers, are we at risk if we do create this digital sales room and we start doing some integration with marketing automations and things like that,
Yeah.
that we're actually going to be pushing people away because we're doing push button marketing and not really interacting with them?
I don't think so. And the reason I say that is because, Jen, I have some disturbing news for you. You and I are out. Gen X is out. Like we are on the way out. And who's coming in is Gen Y and Gen Z. And right now, they're over more than 50% of influencers and decision makers in B2B processes, B2B decision making processes. They don't want to talk to us. They really don't. They want to interact through technology. All the research, if you look at the research out there, the number one way that the millennials and Gen Z get information is through technology information, through websites. They go to websites and do their own research. They go to forums, right? They look at industry websites and industry forums. That's how they get information. That's how they've grown up. Unlike Gen X and baby boomers like you and I, we like in person. We also like talking to our peers, and then we go to a vendor website. But we're the kind of people that I'll go, hey, Jam, I'm looking for a sales engagement platform. What have you been using? What's your experience? That's not how Gen Y and Gen Z operate. They want to be interacted with in a digital format. And in fact, research shows that almost 60 to 70% of the sales process has already occurred in a digital format, a self-guided format, before they ever want to talk to you. And the challenge in that is, I tell people, it's like, you want to get married, but you don't want to date me, right? You just want to show up and get married, but we haven't dated. And that's the challenge, because you want me to know who you are. You want me to know how you want me to interact with you and have a personalized experience, but you don't want to date me. And so digital sales rooms enable that personalization. They enable you to create welcome videos or personal touches within this digital space. It's just a microsite, right? A digital sales room is just a microsite within a platform typically, or standalone technology that is a space for you to collaborate and personalize. And so while you and I may like that research does not support that Gen Y and Gen Z want that. And so we have to meet our buyers where they are.
Okay, so so when we start interpreting some of that data, there's often pitfalls that we can fall into. So also when you start talking about market ready, the studies show anywhere from 1% to 2% are actually market ready
Right.
for your solution. So when you start running all of this entire ecosystem together, there's certain metrics that we often can misinterpret, and could start putting things in place that aren't going to actually deliver some of the growth numbers that we want. So if I'm waiting and trying to get people who are to come down to that 1% to 2% thing, yeah, they want the autonomy. I already know my problem. I already know who the players are, and therefore I'm going to do all my research and interaction, before I start going down this path a little bit further. So it's like, okay, that's good for one segment of that journey. But if I'm looking at, like you said, you're exactly right. These people are shifting. There's more Gen Y, millennials, all those getting into decision-making power, but the problems are getting significantly more complex and they don't have the experience in them. So they look in other places in order to help to say, what should I even be looking at? Right. And so that has a whole different solution set that we talk about a lot with senior leaders.
I don't think, by the way, digital sales rooms are not to solve that problem. They're not going to solve that problem. Right. So they're not intended for that. And I do agree with you. That's why I use the analogy, you want to get married, but you don't want to date. I mean, at some point, Gen Y and Gen Z has to say, we're going to do some dating, right? Because if you have a complex problem, we need to be able to have a conversation about it, a one-to-one human conversation about that complex problem, so that I can honestly tell you if I can help you or not, right? So I think that's part of the value of that one-to-one interaction.
A lot of the feedback that I hear these senior sales leaders talk about, talking about that different generations of sellers, SDRs, BDRs, XDRs, and getting into their younger AEs, is they say they almost sit there and wait for marketing to give them some type of golden ticket to act on.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, how do I get them engaged and motivated and moving to the process? Well, maybe having them onboarding in the digital sales room could be helpful, but how can an organization really shift some of that enablement piece in regards to sales with a digital sales room?
Yeah, well, let's unpack that question for a minute because there's a lot in there. I think first and foremost, finding sellers that truly love hunting and prospecting. If you can figure that out, you will be a bazillionaire. Okay, so that's just number one. That is super. That's like the golden goose. If you can find what is that profile, how do you replicate that? How do you scale that? How do you go find those people that jazzes them every day to get on that phone? So that's a whole separate issue, right? And I think we do know culturally and generationally, sales as a career is less appealing to Gen Y and Gen Z. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And we have to do a lot of work as sellers and sales leaders to position why. I think sales is an incredible career. It's been really good to me. I think especially as a woman in sales, it's an amazing career to be in. So that's a whole nother podcast, honestly. So I would say that's let me put that aside around the prospecting piece. But I also, that's why I went back to the use case around onboarding and enabling and training sellers with digital sales rooms. I think it's a really compelling use case. And let me say this, marketing and sales, we need to come together. We need marketing to create the right content from an enablement perspective to populate these digital sales rooms if we're going to use them internally. We need enablement professionals working with marketing to say, hey, how do we want to teach our sellers to go sell these products? And you do that internally. So that is a partnership. And I think very often what happens, as you know, marketing creates collateral that's really external facing. That's the purpose of it, is to be externally facing. And the sales organization feels like we got to take this content and repurpose it so that it actually works for sellers. And then enablement's over here going, what are you crazy people doing? We've got 12 versions of the same piece of content. Stop recreating the wheel. And that's why I say go and talk to marketing, bring them in the fold, get enablement in the same room, design these sales rooms, because the part of the other purpose around these sales rooms is you're trying to create a branded, consistent experience for your buyers. Because right now they're experiencing dozens of emails, file attachments, repetitive content sharing, unbranded experiences. Well, so are your internal stakeholders. So are your internal sellers that you're onboarding. New hire processes are not great usually. People have all the right intentions, but they're really painful a lot of times. So the same experience we're trying to create for our buyers and prospects, we're also trying to create for our internal stakeholders. So get together to create. You need marketing, you need enablement. And typically what you're going to find is marketing owns the tech stack that owns digital sales rooms. So typically these rooms are going to be in part of the marketing tech stack, or it will be in a sales readiness platform or a sales content management platform, and enablement's going to own it. So you got to bring these different parties together. Sales has to help bring them together. And you're also trying to reduce friction. One of the other great things about digital sales rooms is it takes friction out of the sales process because there's increased coordination, there's increased visibility into the sales process and the stakeholders within that process, and it just reduces repetitive manual work. So again, what you're trying to do for your buyers and prospects, you want to also do internally, reduce friction in the onboarding process and make it a seamless branded experience. And then I think finally, what I'm super excited about, and I don't know how, we're not there yet, but I think we're getting there, are the insights that we get from digital sales rooms. If we can get everyone interacting in one space, we can figure out if it's a 45-day or 180-day sales process, what are the real stages of the sales process? What was asking for? What did they really need to make a decision? And take those insights and funnel them back into training programs or enablement programs or marketing efforts, and use those insights to make us smarter and have more success, increase deal velocity, increase win rates, all kinds of things we can focus on. I think the insights are like TBD. I think we're still trying to figure that out, but I think that's kind of the promise of a digital sales room.
Well, I think you bring up a really interesting, point and dilemma that a lot of organizations are actually struggling with, and that is we may have somebody in an organization who we've interacted with, essentially, who we're intending and hoping to champion the cause of putting this in place. And then we know there's these other stakeholders that are going to be involved with it. And, we are trying to give them what they need in our digital sales room. But I see that these three people haven't done a darn thing or interacted with it one thing at all.
Yeah.
The likelihood of moving things forward are going to be slim to none in that scenario.
Yeah, and it is a change man. I mean, anything is, this, you've been around like I have. It's a change management initiative, right? So it's a change management initiative for the buyer, because now you're asking them to interact with us in a different way. And it's also a change management initiative internally between sales enablement, and marketing. And one thing I will say, it's top of mind, so I want to share it with you. A lot of times I've heard, what about privacy? You're sending me this link, I got to click on, I got to put my email address in to get into this room. Actually, privacy officers love digital sales rooms because they can gate them and they can monitor them, and they're much more secure than you sending out email attachments all over the internet, right? It's like, when I hear that concern, it almost makes me laugh, because I think, so how would sending an email with attachments all over the world be more secure than going into a room, right?
Not possible.
Yeah. So I think very interesting. So privacy officers love this because they can gate content. That's the other thing that I get really excited when I think about all the use cases or possibilities. So let's say that you're a CEO. I'm going to gate certain content for you that only you can see, because you don't need to be a part of the T's and C's and the nits and nats conversations we're having. That would just torture you, right? So we can gate content based on your persona and your audience. And the other thing that I think is super interesting, let's say that you're my primary buyer, but you send the link to this room to 4 other people in the decision-making process or the buying process that I wasn't aware of. I can see where you've sent that. So now I've got insight to, okay, wait a minute, there are actually 4 other stakeholders in this buying process that I didn't have a clue about and Jim didn't share with me. But I can see they've logged into this room, and now I have their email address. And now I can say, well, hey, Jim, I see Anne logged in. What's her role in this process? So it creates this visibility.
Those surprises never happen. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And I think, what? That's what the value of, I look at technology. To me, technology is not the answer, but it enables the answer, right? Technology only enables the answer. And the human part is what we want to focus on. The relationships we're building, right? The conversations, the transparency. And if technology can enable that and help me with that, like the example I just gave, that is the purpose of it. That's why we want to use it.
So the thing that should scare you the most is if you actually own a digital sales room and all of a sudden they start sharing the link to it with a legal and procurement. You better be scared.
That's right. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, stop. So, I mean, it's a super exciting, I think, just in general with, AI and the opportunities we have with AI to help to enable sales and create efficiencies. We don't need sellers writing their own emails every single time. Let AI do that. And the same thing with digital sales rooms. Use your tools, create templates. The real success in implementing a sales room, besides understanding the obvious we talked about around the buyer journey, is understand, what kind of content works, having good content, leveraging your partners to help you with that. So you can take friction out of the sales process. I mean, the name of the game is get to know as fast as possible and yes, as fast as possible, right? And so this can kind of help you do that.
Well, and I mean, to me, it's really interesting. And oftentimes what I refer to is that sometimes we're just blind with our own corporate arrogance.
Mm.
Depending on where we actually started a relationship with a potential buyer, can greatly have an impact in regards to the level of competition I'm going to be facing.
Absolutely.
And I talk about the prospect experience. There's a buyer experience. Then there's a customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about sales, marketing, and customer success. We need to look at the whole buyer end of that throughout the entire continuum. There's a prospect experience, a buyer experience, and then there's a customer experience. And in today's world, it's becoming to the point where it doesn't take long for most solutions to become almost agnostic. Okay, this one's a little bit different than this one, but basically they're kind of doing some of the same core functionality.
Yeah.
Our differentiator is in the experience, the entire continuum. And so for me, I see this as a huge boost,
Yeah.
in that whole buyer experience.
Well, I totally agree. And what I think, for me, what I found is really frustrating. So there's two big gaps around the sales revenue engine, and they're between marketing and sales and customer success, right? So marketing gets all this great data, all these intent signals. It's not passed to sales. We don't know what's happened before we interact with them. So that's a gap. And that's closing because of the tech stack and some other initiatives. And then there's sales and customer success. And so there's nothing more frustrating as a buyer to go through this whole sales process with you, and we agree to certain things. And then I get the customer success rep on the phone, and he or she is like, okay, so tell me again now what we bought. It's like, oh my gosh, do people not talk to each other? That's why I love these digital sales rooms, because you literally just pass the room to the customer success person, and they can go in the room and see everything that happened, all the conversations, the contracts, what was agreed to, what the sales process looked like. And so they just pick the ball up, and then they can share those insights back to marketing, right? And they can, this like virtuous circle that we can create this feedback loop. That's why I think, we've talked for years. We thought CRM was going to do this. We thought CRM was going to be this single pane of glass, create transparency. No. I mean, I went through the Siebel days. I don't know if you remember Siebel. And then we started doing, CRM. And I was like, oh my gosh, we just keep doing the same thing over and over. So no, that is not going to do it. I think if these are done well and they are considered a change management initiative and use all the good principles around change management, I think they can be a game changer. And I'm pretty excited about the potential, because I think we're just at the beginning of using them.
Well, I think you bring up, this kind of goes back to that whole maturation component. I mean, all of those tools that we're referring to in regards to CRM and how they have not evolved into doing this is that they really were built in order for the internal process flow to work, not buyer experience, and not the buyer, the way that they go through their buying process. I mean, for me, it's really interesting, especially when you start talking about involving procurement and legal and things like that, how most people who are owning the business operations really don't know how their company buys.
Yes, that's 100% true. Yes. Yeah. Because often, I mean, I know you've probably been in these same conversations. I'll get passed to procurement when I was a seller, and I just think, oh my gosh, we're going to have to start this all over again. They have no idea why their customers buying this solution. They have no idea the value to the business this is adding. And it's really just, can I beat you down on price? And so everything we tell sellers about selling on value and being consultative and solving problems gets thrown out the window because procurement comes in and goes, I need to cut the 10% or whatever it is. And I'm not bashing procurement, FYI. I know they have a very important role within organizations. I'm just saying now procurement can be a part of that. They can log into the room, right? They can be a part of the conversation instead of having to resell it. I mean, I used to try the strategy of get my buyer to go talk to procurement, right? And help them understand the value. But in big companies, that doesn't work. They're like, that's not our process, and you got to go talk to procurement.
Those days are over. I mean, and I always never let somebody internally carry your message, and digital sales room helps.
Yeah, right. Because like I said, you could invite procurement before the deal is done to say, hey, this is the negotiation stage. This is where we are. Like, don't come back to me, procurement, after we've all agreed, which is what typically happens. And now you want your 10% or whatever the metric is. So that's why I think it just creates transparency and a level of honesty, frankly, and credibility in what has happened through the sales cycle that I think is really healthy for sales as a profession, honestly.
Well, okay. So very enlightening. And as you said, we're in the early stages of all this, but but it's also important, like you said, is, your current tech stack may already have the ability for you to do something like this.
Yes. I also, when I talk to people and they ask about the tech stack, I would say, I don't have any data to support this, by the way, Jen, this is just my gut. I think probably 70% of people have a decent enough tech stack to be successful to implement their strategy. They just need to go and rationalize the tech stack and start with the end in mind. What is our strategy? How do we want to go to market? What do we want our customer experience, buyer experience to be? And the other piece, and once you do that and you say, okay, and then you got to figure out what piece of technology enables what stage in the sales process. What technology do I have is enabling prospecting, is enabling discovery? Like you talk about conversational intelligence. That's great. Everyone wants it. Why do you want it? What are you going to do with it? What insights do you need to enable what part of the sales process? And then go back to your vendors. Ask them. You could have so many capabilities that when you originally engaged with the vendor were not important at that time. But because you've grown as a business or you have a better understanding of your buyer journey, you now need different functions. Go back to your vendor. That's their job. They want to help you understand how to fully leverage and adopt their technology. Go back to them and ask them, say, hey, I now need to do this. Can you do this?
Yeah, and I would also say, just like you were saying, always take time in order to be able to think differently,
Yeah.
And much like I had talked about at peerroundtables.com, we have two very large communities, one for senior marketing leaders, one for senior sales and rev leaders. And when I started bringing up this topic, they were like, what are you talking about? But now they'll know.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, Jim? I think that's a great, and I'm not just saying this because you brought those up. I actually really believe this. Talk to your peers. Talk to people in the business. Say, what are you doing? How are you finding success? I mean, as I just said before, we're Gen Xers. We love to talk to each other and find out what's happening. Leverage the people around you.
Well, and here's the reality, and this is what I tell people all the time. I said, look at how Amazon exploded in growth. Look at how Netflix exploded in growth. All of these companies that are just mega companies now, they really started taking off when they started saying, hey, you know what? People just like you bought this too. Oh.
Yes, yeah.
People that watch this also watch these things too. Oh, look, people like you that have the same struggles and responsibilities,
Yeah.
doing things and have learned things. And if you're not taking time to interact with those people and find out what they know, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree.
You're in trouble. Anne Slough, awesome conversation. How does the B2B DM gang get in touch with you?
You know what? LinkedIn is probably the best way. Go find me on LinkedIn. You'll see, search Anne Slough. I'm probably the only one. I can't imagine there's another Anne Slough out there. Go find me on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to, and I mean this sincerely. People want to reach out and, let's have a great conversation. Let's brainstorm. Let's figure out what's happening. I want to learn from my peers. I want to see what's happening. I want to stay current. And if I can help anyone else, I would love to do it.
And that's Anne with an E, and Slough is Sloughgh. Anne.
Yep, that's it.
Knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Yeah, you too, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.